Welcome to the Insights Unlocked podcast. I'm Aaron Diocampo, Brand Content Production Manager at User Testing, and joining us today as host is Sean Treiser. Sean is a Senior Staff Product Strategist at User Testing. Welcome, Sean.
Hey everyone, happy to be here on Insights Unlocked.
And our guest today is Neeraj Ramesh. Neeraj is the executive producer of Giving Experiences at Givelify. Givelify is an Indianapolis-based online and mobile giving platform that has processed more than $5 billion in donations for more than 1.5 million people since 2014, giving to more than 70,000 charitable organizations, nonprofits, and places of worship. Welcome to the show, Neeraj.
Hey, Aaron. Hey, Sean. Thank you guys for having me. Happy to be here.
Neeraj, I've been looking forward to having our conversation. To get us started, can you tell us a bit about Givelify and the work that you do there?
Yeah, of course. So as Aaron mentioned, Givelify, we just turned 10 years old late last year. And the founding story is kind of interesting. So our CEO and founder, Wally, he actually found himself at church on a Saturday or on a Sunday afternoon, and he was actually on a date at the time. So interesting first date. I believe it was their first date, but he had taken her to church, and found himself in one of those situations where the offering plate was being passed around. And obviously, your date is with you. He's trying to impress her. So he opens up his wallet, and then finds out or sees that he's got absolutely no cash on him. So he ends up borrowing money from his date and promises to pay her back, but thanks her for letting him make that donation. And then a couple weeks later, he finds himself in the almost exact same situation where he's taken her to church again. They're at service. The offering plate is being passed around. Once again, as you may expect or imagine, he is looking around for cash, doesn't have any on him. And so he asks himself this question of, it's like 2014, mobile apps, mobile phones and mobile apps have been in the market for a while now. Why am I still trying to look for cash, or why are organizations still expecting me to carry cash when I pretty much use my phone for all other payments or financial transactions these days? So that was kind of where the idea was born. And then he contacted me and a couple of other people that he went to college with, and he was like, "Hey guys, I have this idea. I think there's a market for it. Would you come on board and help me build it?" And so we jumped on board. We still had our day jobs, but we were kind of doing this on the side. And so I started off kind of building the iOS and Android mobile apps. And for a long time, I was kind of single-handedly building our mobile apps. And over time, that kind of became infeasible. So started growing the team around the engineering of our mobile apps. And then over time, started looking at things a little bit more cross-functionally. So we added not just the engineers, but also started looking at product and design and marketing and sales and customer support, and basically all the things you would expect to, take a product or a solution from concept to finish, and all the different pieces that are needed to bring that to life. And so that's kind of what I do today, lead that cross-functional business unit. And at the end of the day, my job is to keep our donors happy. So when they're happy, I'm happy as well.
So you've been along for the entire ride, Neeraj, building it yourself at first and then growing the team. I'm curious what signals you sensed that it was time to grow. Was there the demand on one side of the market or the other? What was the engagement that you were seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think within the first 3 months, I believe we raised about $100,000 in donations. And so very early, we did get signals back from the market that there definitely is a need for this. It's a pain point. It's an unmet need for people, especially like I mentioned back in 2014, people had already gotten used to the concept of um, putting in credit cards online on mobile apps, and just not having to deal with the hassle of carrying cash or writing checks. Now, typically, the industry where we started, or the sector that we focused on, was more on the worship side of things. So we started with churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, other places of worship, because typically they're a little bit slower when it comes to adopting technology, and so there was a challenge there where we had to make sure that, one, we were pitching this at the right time when they were ready to accept technology in their organizations, and then two, making sure that their members were open to the idea or to the concept as well. And then once we were able to overcome those challenges, we definitely started moving more into the nonprofit and charity fundraising space as well. But yeah, within our first year, I believe we started breaking even, um, which is not very typical, I know, for a lot of startups. So that was super promising. And yeah, that kind of gave us the momentum that we needed to keep going and really go quit our full-time day jobs and go in on this.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I love how y'all found your niche, your foot in the door, immediately found $100,000 in donations, and now you're over 5 billion. Really impressive stuff. On top of that, in 2022, Givelify received the prestigious Stevie Award for Best User Experience for its mobile app. I'm curious, how does Givelify utilize feedback from user testing to prioritize new features and drive enhancements in the app?
Yeah, so we actually have this saying at Giblify. I think it's a proverb. I believe it was originally coined by Abraham Lincoln, and so we throw it around sometimes in conversations. But it goes something like, what Abraham Lincoln said was, "When you have 6 hours to chop a tree, you spend the first 5 hours grinding the axe." Something along those lines. I may have butchered it in a little bit, but the idea being, when you're trying to build something, you spend a lot of time prepping and making sure that you're building the right thing. And I'm not sure we spend the ratio of how much time we spend planning to executing is, 5 hours to 1 hour or 5 to 1, like the proverb goes. But we do spend a lot of time on research, and that's both on academic research. So we partner with universities and other academic professionals, um, and really look at what's been studied in the space and what's been proven with scientific methods and research that we can kind of learn from and not repeat some of the past mistakes or um, challenges that people have faced, but also it gives us like a good foundation or starting ground to build our solutions from. And then the other piece is definitely, the deep customer research throughout the product development lifecycle. We make sure that we have the voice of the customer embedded pretty much all throughout the process. And that's kind of where we've started leveraging user testing a lot more in that process. Um, More recently, we started using user testing for being able to speak to our own donors. So previously, we've used user testing and tapped into the network that you guys have and gotten some really great feedback from lookalike audiences. But we wanted to take that next step and see, how do we leverage user testing for tapping into our own donors. So for our listeners out there, if that's something that you haven't explored or are interested in exploring, I would definitely recommend that. I think it's been super efficient and really removed a lot of the logistical complexities and inefficiencies that we previously had, where we had to set up all these interviews and all the communication that we had to send out and the planning and all of that. It really takes the hassle out of all of that, and then helps you focus on what you want to do the most, right? Which is speak to the customer and get their feedback. So yeah, that's been super great.
So it sounds like you're actually getting feedback from both unfamiliar audiences and the people who are actively already in your network, very familiar with Givelify. Do you ever find surprise differences between those perspectives? Anything that has gleaned new product opportunities or any surprises in your world?
We do. So I think one thing we try to do is, even with the audiences from the user testing network, we have really good screener questions to make sure that they, for the most part, look very similar to our own audiences. I think the differences come in with people who are not familiar with our products and solutions versus people who are. So I think usually the way we like to split that is when we're testing, um, new products or concepts. We want people who are familiar with our existing products and solutions so that we can see how layering this would really benefit them, or how they would um, receive something like that, versus when we're testing uh, more routine optimization flows, or trying to enhance the user experience for a new person coming in who isn't familiar with the product. That's really where we like to leverage the user testing network as well.
Great. That's actually an area I wanted to zero in on. Let's talk a little bit about the first time user experience. Now, I understand Givelify is kind of a unique model where you're matching up both organizations with donors, and then there might be a few different types of donors as well. So, what are some common challenges that new users face when they're first on Givelify, and how has feedback from user testing helped you optimize that onboarding process?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges we face for quite some time now is that we've only seen about a 50% conversion rate when it comes to new users who download the app and then make their first gift. And it's something that the good thing is we've held that pretty steady over the years, and we have, and obviously it's um, at par or above the industry average. So that part is good. But also we've always wanted to um, kind of push the needle on that and see what more we could do to help move that rate higher. I think what we've previously focused on are some of the more functional challenges that people may face, like, you know, downloading a new app. That's not a given these days, especially when you have so many different apps on your phone, and sometimes storage can be an issue. But do you really want yet another app to do something? There is a cost associated with it, right? And people make that mental calculation before they download the app. Um, and then finding the organization that they want to give to, that's been a challenge for people, making sure they put in their right payment information and all of that. So we've typically spent a lot of time focusing on some of those more technical or functional challenges that people may have, to really optimize that giving flow and make it as frictionless and seamless as possible. um, but I think more recently, what we've really focused on, and where user testing has come into play a big role, is like understanding some of those mental and emotional challenges that people go through. So a key insight, for example, for us was that security and safety of personal information is still a big deal for people. Right. And you can imagine, especially for our user base, which tends to skew a little bit older, so more in the 35 to 65 demographic or range, we found that people are not only concerned about their financial information being compromised, but also their personal information being compromised, right? And I think obviously the news media and often sensationalizes data breaches and hacks and things like that. So that's obviously top of mind for a lot of people. And so one of the things we did was, the first thing you see when you open the app is a few different value propositions that we tried to lay out to alleviate some of those concerns, and we were able to validate this with our own users, but also the network on user testing, where we were able to test out or try out different messages and see what resonated. And so we focused on one of our primary or key messages is the PCI compliance, the SSL encryption, that security piece, really trying to give people that peace of mind that your information, both personal and financial information, is safe and secure. Also leveraging things like social proof. So, we've got over 1.5 million people who trust this product or the solution. And then when it comes to like finding your organization, we wanted to have the picture of the church pastor or the nonprofit leader or official, so that you're giving to the right place. This is trusted by them as well. And so, yeah, building trust, especially with the new platform for our users, has really been a key area of focus for us.
Well, that's really interesting how you started off thinking logically through the new user funnel, and of course shaping up those functional bits of downloading, finding your organization, of course paying for your donation, but then moving on to those emotional bits. You really have to dig deep to get into sense of trust and security and connection. So that's some deep work that y'all have done to get into the minds of your users. Now, you mentioned before we started recording that Givelify introduced a new program that specifically was focused on enhancing digital giving that resulted in an increase in donations of more than 10%. Now, that's a big number when you look at the scale that y'all are touching. Could you share a little bit about how user feedback led to that development?
Yeah, for sure. It's actually something that I'm super passionate about personally. So we call it Champions of Good, and it's the first ever loyalty program um, in the charitable giving space. So not too different from e-commerce loyalty or um, other programs that you may have seen or been a part of in the hospitality space or in the airlines. Um, collecting miles and collecting and redeeming miles space. So similarly, we have a concept where we want to incentivize consistent giving among our donors. So we focus more on the number of gifts that you give over the course of a year, and not really the dollar amount, because financial situations may change or vary person to person. But what we really care about is that you're making that impact um, consistently. So whether that's weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, whatever cadence works best for you. We wanted to, we really designed this program to be able to appreciate and also celebrate the impact that you are making, and make you feel good at the end of the day, because it's very unique in the sense that um, with most other products and companies, when you pay for something, there's a product or a service that you get in return, right? Like you buy something on Amazon and a package shows up at your door. And when it comes to charitable giving, it's literally like you're giving your money away without the expectation of anything in return, right? And so the question we ask ourselves is like, what is that product or that service that we're providing for this money that you are giving away. And a lot of it is being able to show the impact that you're making, right? That being able to hear directly from the organizations and the people whose lives you're touching or changing. Um, but also, we want people to feel good about what they're doing, right? And so we call it the warm glow, which is kind of this accumulation of positive emotions and feelings that you get when you do make a charitable donation or a charitable gift. And so, yeah, we test a lot when it comes to how we make people feel with our products and solutions. So all the way down to the colors that we use in the app, to the animations, the haptic feedback, um, and we ask questions. To a lot of them are open ended, some of them are unprompted. We just want to hear directly from our users um, what they experience and what they feel, and some of the thoughts, the raw thoughts and emotions that go through their mind when they experience these things. And hopefully at the end of it, we're making them feel good, so they keep coming back.
Now, that idea of the warm glow, that kind of is what you are delivering to your users, to your donors. And of course, internally, y'all have a good understanding of what that warm glow is meant to be. But I'm really curious how you test for that. How do you ensure that that warm glow is being delivered to your end users before launching that experience? What are you probing for? What are you looking for in that feedback when you're running those tests?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think usually one rule of thumb that we have is when we do put out something in front of our users. So for example, if we have a prototype that so this is even before we start implementing or engineering something. We've done a lot of work in the product and design space, so we usually have some wireframes or a prototype that we want to get some quick feedback on. And when we do put that in front of users, first we'll let them experience it unhindered. So usually that first pass, we let them experience it for themselves, go through all the screens. What I love about user testing is that it encourages them to think out loud. So what that lets us do is understand how they process it in real time. And so usually we're looking for a couple of things. One is comprehension. Do they understand the feature, the solution? Is it intuitive? Does it make sense? And then two is it delivering that warm glow, those positive feelings that we expect from this solution, right? Or from this feature. So that first pass, they go through it unhindered. Usually we don't have any questions through that flow. We let them experience, process, and articulate what they're feeling. And then we go through a second round of questions where we'll stop screen by screen, and then we'll ask them specific questions on that screen. And I think seeing it that second time also helps them verbalize or articulate after they've processed it for a little bit. Um, yeah, more effectively articulate what they felt or how they're feeling. And so yeah, a good example that comes to mind is, as part of this loyalty program, we wanted to introduce a feature called giving streaks. So, similar to maybe, I don't know if you're familiar with the streaks feature on Duolingo, or other apps have it too, where you try to build this consistency where you're using the same product. Where you're using that feature or product continuously, right? And so when we introduced or when we tested that feature, um, seeing that they had given, for example, 7 months in a row or 13 months in a row, that definitely brought about really positive, strong emotions in people. And they were excited to see that consistency. But on the flip side, when they saw things like your highest streak was 25 months or 44 months, that um, did not give us the response that we initially expected. So we thought, okay, people would be happy to see that as well. But a lot of people felt like, oh, did I fall off the wagon? What happened? Like, why am I no longer on that highest streak? Another donor was like, well, it's not a competition, so why are you making me, uh, push or strive for something that, for me, it's not really a goal for me to have the highest streak that I previously had. Maybe, life circumstances have changed or things happened where they were no longer able to maintain or build on that streak, and so um, they let that lapse, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But more importantly, we wanted to focus more on the current period of consistency that they're on and help them keep building on that. And so that's just a quick example of, like, something that we expected might be received well but wasn't, and just understanding like their thought process and like the emotions really helped us prevent some of these mistakes that, yeah, otherwise would have been costly or taken a lot more time to rectify.
That's a fantastic example. And humans will always surprise us, right? The things that we think will support additional engagement could directly backfire and actually lead to discouraging folks from using our products in the way we wish. But all of this proactive testing that you and your team are doing is clearly working incredibly well. Givelify currently leads all giving apps on the App Store and the Google Play Store with more than 104,000 verified reviews with an average 4.9 out of 5-star rating, which is incredibly impressive. How are you thinking about maintaining such high quality standards for your current users and your future users?
Yeah, um, I think it boils down to making sure that we're building the right things the right way. If I had to, drill it down or distill it to the most simplest terms, I think that's what we're always focused on, and we have a lot of frameworks and processes to make sure that we're on the right track. So, for example, we have this diverge converge framework, which I've seen other companies use as well, but it's kind of like a double diamond approach where we diverge on the problem space and then converge there to make sure that we're tackling the right problems. And so during that process, we're listening to our customers, we're doing the academic research, we're doing some market research as well, and making sure that we've identified the right opportunity. So that's the first diamond, and then we do a similar diamond where we diverge and then converge on the solution space. So that's again another place where we have different ideas and we build them into prototypes. We test them, um, make sure we're on the right track. And I think previously we've kind of relied on um, real world testing or field testing, as you may call it, to get this feedback from people. Where when we put out a brand new program like Champions of Good, or a brand new feature, or even smaller enhancements or optimizations, we usually pilot it with let's say 5 to 10% of our user base, get some real world feedback, make some quick iterations, and then make sure that we're constantly improving or iterating on that. But I think where we've kind of shifted now is spending a lot more time and effort, even pre-pilot, making sure that we're doing these prototypes and prototypes and getting them in front of people earlier, and doing a lot more validation testing before we even get something out into the market. And I think that's helping us reduce a lot of costs in the long term, where we don't spend as much time in the pilot phase. At that point, we're just revalidating what we already know, and we just want to make sure that it's checking all the boxes that we expected it to check. And so, yeah, I think that's gonna continue to be a primary focus for us. And then the other piece, I think, which you called out as well, is kind of that emotional loyalty side of things. Where it's like, when it comes to loyalty, there's the rational side of things where people continue to use solutions or go back to a product because of previous experiences, right? Whether it's the cheapest option, or it's the most convenient one, or the safest or most reliable one. Um, that's obviously a big component of why people continue to use products. But I think the more exciting, but also the more challenging piece is, how do you build that emotional loyalty where you really speak to the identity of someone, the core identity of someone, or they use a brand or a product to express their identity, right? And so for us, it's like we that's almost a bigger focus for us these days, since we want to make sure that all of the solutions that we put out, it's really resonating with who you are as a person, and also um, helping you reach that person that you aspire to be, right? So yeah.
Fantastic. So you're kind of climbing the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and making sure that you're helping people find their self-actualization.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So it's been a great conversation here, Neeraj. Would you mind if I asked you just one more bonus question?
Of course, let's do it.
Okay. So I really admire how y'all have taken on the complexity of having all different kinds of stakeholders, given that you are a social impact giving platform. So I'm curious if you have any advice for other folks who might be working on similar social good oriented products, and how they should think about addressing their wide range of stakeholders.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because we obviously, we've got almost like a three-sided marketplace. We've got the donors on one hand, we've got the organizations that they're giving to, and then we've got the community that they impact, as well as obviously there's the fourth dimension of Givelify, or us as the company trying to facilitate all of that. Um, I think the most important piece of advice that I can potentially give in these kinds of situations is to really align on both at a leadership level, and pretty much at the company level, align on who your target or your core customer is. And for us, very early on, we decided and we aligned on that being the donor for us. And even though these donors are supporting these organizations, which in turn are making impact in these communities, we wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, first and foremost, we're putting the donor first. right? Because a lot of times the the needs of the donor can sometimes be in conflict with the needs of the organization. So, for example, one of the products or solutions that organizations love to push, two actually come to mind. One is recurring giving, right? Which is essentially organizations want stable, consistent income, right? They want that peace of mind of having consistent income or money hitting their bank account every week or every month. They got bills to pay too, right? So they want donors to sign up or sign into recurring giving, where that set amount of money gets deducted every single month. Um, and nonprofits love this too, right? And they typically they spend a lot of time and effort making sure that you sign up as a recurring donor. Even when you make that first gift, they'll try and get you to sign up or buy into that. The problem is on the donor side, when it comes to giving, it's a very emotional act. Like we've talked about, there's a lot of um, there's a whole bunch of feelings and emotions that go into it. And when you when you think about recurring giving, it's similar to like how you would pay your mortgage bill or how you would pay for rent and utilities and things like that. And it's very transactional and really takes the joy out of giving. And so people, miss the act of giving. And so what we found is that people actually only less than 3% of people actually sign up for recurring giving. And most people prefer to be reminded when they want to give. Uh, so whatever frequency or cadence that they choose, they'd rather get a reminder and then go through the act themselves, so they can experience those emotions that come with the process or with um, that practice of giving. And the second piece obviously is like, you don't want to potentially overdraft or not have the money in your bank account, and then the last thing you want is being charged fees for a donation, right? So they do appreciate that flexibility and control to change the amount if they need to. um, because for a lot of people, especially when it comes to um, giving to their faith, sometimes it's not trivial sums of money, right? It could be up to like 10% of their income. So that's one example. The other example is donor covered fees. So a lot of organizations, they really tap into, or they really want to make sure that they get the um, the entire donation, right? Because typically there's a service fee, which is because of credit card processing fees. So at Givelify, for example, around 3% of your donation goes towards credit card processing and service fees. So organizations, they're like, so if I donate $100 and they're getting only 97, they'll recommend to the donor that you should give 103, for example, so that I get the full $100. But what that does from a donor standpoint is it it moves you from that emotional mindset of I'm just giving money away, and not expecting anything in return, to now you're like in this more rational mindset where you're calculating the cost of this donation and trying to think like, is that $100 donation worth the $3 fee, and making those kinds of calculations, which have been scientifically proven to decrease giving in the long term. Um, and so yeah, there's a battle sometimes trying to educate and help organizations see that this may seem like a good idea in the short term, but in the long term, things like recurring giving, things like donor covered fees, um, they're going to lead to a drop or decline in donations. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the day, when we have these battles or challenges, we're always reminding ourselves of who our core or primary target audience is and making sure that we're doing right by them.
That's fantastic advice. Even, and maybe especially when you have such a wide variety of stakeholders, it's that much more important to focus in on where your impact is going to go the furthest and dig deep to empathize. Of course, had you not done the deep work of learning about perception around recurring payments and donation fees, you wouldn't have been able to design around those elements and make for long-term donors. So really impressive work, Neeraj. So thank you so much for being on the show. I've clearly enjoyed our conversation. I'm curious, how would some of our listeners learn more about you and about Givelify?
Yeah, well, our website is givelify.com. There's a lot of good information there, but also I would recommend checking out our app. It's on the iOS App Store as well as Google Play. Givelify, that's Givelify, and yeah, check it out.
Well, fantastic. Thanks again for being with us, Neeraj. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll be talking very soon.
Thank you, Sean. Love the conversation.